Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Hey friend, welcome back to the Breakthrough Brand podcast. I am so excited you pressed play on this episode because this is a topic that I truly feel like I've been waiting about 6 months to talk about. Whenever I first started doing the profit first accounting method was at the end, in December particularly was my first full month of 2022. And I knew once I started doing it, like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get my system set up and then I'm going to tell all my podcast friends exactly what I'm doing. So that is what I have for you today. We are talking money and accounting systems for our businesses. And to some of you, you hit play on this and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a juicy topic. That's fun. I'm curious about profit first, or I do that myself, or I want to know how Alyssa's managing her money. And others of you might feel like, ew, what is profit first? I don't like accounting. I don't like the math side. What are we doing here? Etc. And I feel each of you. And what I'll say about this episode before we dive in, and next week's episode too, I'm doing this in 2 parts, but I have planned some incredibly practical content for you. I spent a lot of time outlining this and really putting thought into what I'm going to share. And I'm giving you an inside look in what's working for me in my business financially right now, basically, and how I'm making the profit first system work for me. And if you have no clue what profit first is, that's okay. I'm going to explain it to you. This episode will tell you, and you can see for yourself if this is something you're interested in trying for your own business. So let's get to it. This is part 1. Be sure to come back next week where I'm going to take this all a step further and walk you through exactly how I do my end of month finances every month. But right now we're about to talk about what is profit first, how I set up my own business profit first accounts, what my different percentages are, how I do my business finance closing out, what all the different account types are, how I set it up. I mean, there's so many different things. This is, again, is a large outline here. So really excited. Let's dive into it. All right. So to start us out, let's talk about what is profit first. Again, some of you might be coming to this episode already doing profit first. Maybe you're familiar with it because you're like me. And for years you had business friends telling you, I do profit first. And you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Again, that was me for years. But Profit First is a book by Mike Michalowicz, and it's more than a book. It's an entire money management system for businesses. And you may have heard of some other Mike's other books. He wrote the book, let's see, The Pumpkin Plan is the name of one. And then Clockwork is one he's also really known for besides Profit First. So you may have read one of those or may have heard of them, or maybe you've heard of Profit First, but it is a book. But really, again, it's an entire money management system for businesses. In fact, many people who do Profit First don't actually read the book or don't finish it. You just kind of figure out how to do it and go for it. There's tons of resources online about it. Like this podcast episode is going to be added into that reservoir of resources, but there's a lot of ways to figure it out outside of the book. But to also just back it up a little bit more of explaining from his website, the explanation of it that he says, I'm going to literally read by quote. Here's what he says. I created the Profit First system to eradicate my own financial struggles. And I am honored to say that as of writing this, over 175,000 companies have implemented the system. The method is simple. Every time you get a deposit from sales, take a predetermined percentage of that money as profit. Of course, there are a few more steps than just that, but even with that simple first step of taking your profit first, you will become permanently profitable. Profit is not an event. Profit is a habit. This book will show you exactly how to do it. So that is how he describes it. And again, you might hear that and be like, okay, what do you do? And that's how I felt so often when I would hear people say, yeah, like profit first is paying yourself first. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I tend to pay myself first actually, but like, well, how is this different? And for me, what really defines profit first is the way that like you're using lots of different bank accounts, which again, I'm going to get into exactly what my accounts are and how I do that, but you're using multiple bank accounts and you're moving your money around before it gets spent. Basically, you're giving your money a place. It kind of feels similar to just like a budget in some ways of like, in our personal life, we want to be smart with money, right? We're not just spending every dime that comes in. We're telling our money like, hey, you're going to savings. Hey, you're going to like my child's future, like whatever it is, you're doing that sort of thing. So another way to explain it that I found on the internet though, is this: traditional bookkeeping targets profits as what's left over after you pay everything else. As the name suggests, the profit first accounting method prioritizes profits before dealing with operating expenses. Small business owners take a profit out of the cash deposit from sales. So again, thought it sounds complicated. It's way less, at least in my opinion, way less complicated than it actually seems. And before doing this myself, it felt like this far off thing I heard other people talking about, like I do profit first. And then when you start doing it, it all makes sense and really clicks together well. At least that was my own experience. So in order to get started in profit first, here's what I did. I read some of the book. I actually was a book quitter on it, which I kind of hate admitting that on my podcast, but it's true. And maybe I'll come back and finish it another time. I bought a hardback of it. I really did truly enjoy what I read, but something I believe about reading and about business books especially is like, I'm not someone who like, just because I started a book means I have to finish it, especially on information books. I want to start the book, get what information I need out of it for this point in my life, and then be okay with quitting it. And yes, that means I don't get to like mark it as read on Goodreads, but I got what I needed out of it. So that's what I did in the case of Profit First. And again, I might come back to it and finish it. I was reading it over my little Christmas break last year. I took about 3 weeks off from my business, and this was one of the books I was like picking up during that time. And again, I read enough to like get started with it. And what I read was really helpful, and the book is good. So what's really great though is not just reading the book, but like actually setting it up and doing the system. So if you just sit there and read the book, but don't take any action, you're not going to get any results from it, how so much in life works. But the point is really like getting started and doing the system. So let me try to explain to you the system and what I do with my Profit First accounts, how I set them up, basically how I do this whole thing. So I want to preface though, before I like get into sharing all this with you guys, you know this obviously, but I'm not an accountant. I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm not any type of financial advisor. I am just a fellow business owner who is trying to figure all this out just like you. So please consult your own resources, read the Profit First book, ask your own accountant or bookkeeper about anything you have questions on. I am purely just sharing my own experience of what I'm doing and what works for me. And if you're someone listening here, you're like super keen on all things Profit First, you might even hear something I say and say, Elizabeth, you're not doing that right. You're missing the mark on something. And I know that. I know I'm probably not doing it perfectly, but I have in the last 6 months figured out like, okay, how do I want to make this work for my own business, my own type of specific online business with the amount of revenue I'm bringing in, with the different kinds of expenses I have, and with the way my own brain works for like tracking things. So I have put my own spin on elements of it. So it might even feel different than what you perhaps are doing or what you've heard like someone on YouTube or in the book or anything like that say. So with that being said, let's get into it. So with Profit First, one of the key pieces of this is that you have multiple bank accounts. And if you read the book, that really is like step 1 or step 2 of doing this method. One of the other early steps is also like really analyzing your spending and the way revenue, profit, all of that flows in your business to see if you're actually making money and profitable, which is a really cool exercise as well. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. But basically, you're telling your money where to go versus what most business owners do, where you just have like 1 to 2 checking accounts. Maybe you have like one for savings and one is for everything else, where both like income's coming into it, expenses are leaving it, your tax payments sitting there, the money you pay yourself sitting there, like all of that, paying your team, your bills, taxes, all of that is from one account where income's also coming in. That's like the normal way to do bank accounts as a small business owner. Again, you might even only have one, you might have 2, maybe you have 3, but that's more what's normal. But with Profit First, a big piece of it, and this is the piece I personally like the most because again, it works really well for my brain, is like having multiple bank accounts. I do the same thing in my personal life. I didn't even really realize that in some ways we were doing a bit of a Profit First style with bank accounts, with our savings, particularly in personal life. But I brought that into my business through the Profit First method, and I really, really like it. So let me tell you what my business accounts, my business bank accounts have looked like over the years, because I feel like that makes it make more sense when I explain to you what I did when I actually set up the Profit First account. So you might be able to relate to any of these steps I'm about to share. But when I first opened my business, well, first of all, when I first opened my business for probably like half a year to a whole year, I was just running everything through my personal bank accounts. Yep, I was that person. I actually, as much as I think a really important step as a business owner, like a first step is to open your own bank accounts, at like a bank accounts from your business separate from your personal finances. I think it's okay to wait until you have like some paying clients to do that, which is literally what I did. So once I started having paying clients that were like paying more significant amounts and also was starting to incur more business expenses, I opened up my first business account, and it was just one account. That's it. Money came into the account and left from that account. And any of that money that was me saying like this amount is set aside for emergencies or for taxes was done through me typing it into a spreadsheet or a document, like me declaring like, okay, like this $300 is for taxes, this $500 is for savings. Like it was me typing it up like that, but it was all just one bank account. And it was also with the same bank that I do personal banking with, which made internal transfers really easy for like paying myself. So not too long after, I pretty quickly was like, okay, I want 2 accounts. So I opened up another account, and both were actually checking accounts, which is something I, again, personally have found has worked well for me. So I was calling one savings and one checking as like the internal names of the account. But they were both checking accounts. So at this point, the savings account was where I was keeping everything for emergencies and taxes and also holding like profit for the business. But then income and expenses and everything else was happening in the one other account. So basically like this account that I was calling savings was where I was the only one moving money in and out of, but then the other account was where like everything was happening. And that's actually how I did my business finances for years, with just those 2 accounts. And I always felt like I was missing something. And I didn't love that I couldn't just log into my banking platform and see high level numbers of like, this is how much money has come in this month. This is how much I have set aside for taxes currently and all of that kind of stuff. It's like, I guess I can see like my numbers once I get my books for the month, or like looking into ThriveCard, I could see like, okay, how are template sales doing right now? But you can't see like the more details of cash flow it's just one big account all the time. So Profit First fixed those issues for me. And my honest review, I know that's like part of this episode, is that I love it. I love the way I'm doing it now. I feel like I have new money confidence and clarity from this experience. And this whole year so far, because again, I started it in December. So December was my first month. So all of 2023, I've been doing this. I feel like I know what's happening in my business finances way more than I used to because I have this cash flow and I'm telling money where to go. I'm saving more directly. And I see everything really clearly. So let's keep talking. What does my setup actually look like? Let me tell you that. Tell you what it looks like and how I did it. So I bank with a local bank that we also use for our personal finances, and we also use for our real estate business and for my business. If you didn't know, my husband and I own investment properties. We have 5 properties across Tennessee and Alabama. And so that's a separate business from my business. Then I have my own business, and then we have our personal finances. So I added it up, and with this one bank, between all those different places, we have like 9 to 10, possibly 11 total accounts with this one bank. So we got a lot of bank accounts happening because again, we're kind of doing a little bit of the Profit First stuff with other things as well. We're not quite doing that in the real estate business, but we do have more than one account there. We have more than one personal account, but in reality, all those accounts are mainly with my own business. I have 5 total accounts now for my business. So I went from 2 to 5, and I went with the bank I went with because it was where we were already doing our personal banking. And also the accounts were fee free. There was one point in my business for probably like a year-ish where I was paying like a monthly fee for just having a bank account. And it's really frustrating when I think back on that, because I probably should have noticed it sooner and said, hey guys, like, can we talk about removing this fee? Because when I did that, and like contacted my bank and talked to them like, hey, can I get this like $10 monthly fee removed? They pretty quickly removed it and switched me to a type of business account that was fee free. And I believe that with most banks, if you're carrying a decent balance in your accounts, then you really should be able to get your bank to not charge you a monthly fee to keep your money with them. So that's something I would personally look for. And at the bank you're at, if right now you're looking at your accounts and you're getting hit with like $5 to $10 a month just for having the account, and you're carrying a balance, like if you're at like $0 on that account very consistently, maybe that's a little bit different. But if you're carrying a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, then I would be like, hey, can I get that fee removed? And maybe look into, is there a type of account that would make more sense than just like the generic checking or savings account that you're currently with? So back on how I've had the 2 accounts for a while, at one point, they were actually money market accounts, which means that they were making a little bit of money because I was carrying a decent balance, and they suggested to me like do a money market. And then I ended up switching away from it because pretty quickly I realized that that was not a good fit for me because there are penalties and limits on how frequently you can take money in and out of the account, which is not good when you're running a business and paying bills and there's a lot of cash in and a lot of cash out. Like you don't need that. So at this point, those 5 accounts I was saying are all just generic checking accounts that, again, I'm internally nicknaming with my different Profit First names. But yeah, so I went with the bank I went with, though, like I was saying, because the accounts are fee free and I was already with them. And I like that for internal transfers. So you can do what I'm saying, though, with any bank. And I know many people who actually keep their Profit First system within something like the app You Need a Budget, also called YNAB, might be another way you've heard of it. So people who do that, it's actually, they might just have one bank account, maybe 2 bank accounts, but they are like telling their money where to go within this app, kind of like pie chart style, doing all the percentages there. So that works too. There's also a bank I just recently heard about called Relay, which is like supposed to be the official Profit First bank. So that's something else. I believe they're a newer company, but that's something else to consider. And I'll link to any info I find on them in the show notes for you. But those are some other options. So if you're like, hey, the too many accounts thing doesn't work for me, check out YNAB. Although I will tell you, in the Profit First book, he pretty clearly says like you need to do the actual accounts. It's kind of a stickler thing he says about it of like it's better to have the actual accounts versus just like a spreadsheet or something like YNAB. And for me, I was like, okay, I do want to set it up at the bank itself. I like for the money to be like actually moved around, not just theoretically moved around in something like an app or a spreadsheet of me stating where it is. I wanted it to be like really clean cut of like, no, I'm not just saying I'm moving this money from like income to tax savings. It's like actually getting moved there. So I went to my bank and I did it. Let's pause in talking about managing money for a second to talk about getting more cash in the door of your business. I have a very practical and very free resource to share with you. If you're a designer, check out my free guide, How to Find Your First or Next Paying Client ASAP. You can download it at elizabethmccravy.com/ASAP, also linked in the show notes. And this PDF guide walks you through 8 key strategies for finding clients as a designer, great places to look for clients, creative ways to get clients that you might have never thought about, practical tips for implementing these strategies, and so much more. And it's absolutely free to you and goes really well with what we're talking about here of bringing more revenue into your business so that you have more money to manage in the first place. So get that at elizabethmccravy.com/ASAP, absolutely free. Now back to the episode. So I made an appointment with my bank, again, a local bank, and I went there that day, literally anticipating, dropped Colin off at preschool, and I was like, okay, this is probably about to be my entire morning, and I'm going to feel like I should be doing something better with my time and wishing that I could just easily open up these accounts just online in a few clicks. But in reality, opening bank accounts takes a lot of time. I was having to get numbers for my S Corp and my EIN and proof of registration of business, all kinds of stuff, and it took a while. So I made that appointment, went to the appointment. I want to say it was 2 to 3 hours one morning with them in person, getting it all set up. And the bank rep I worked with was super nice, super friendly, and really very helpful. And some of the time, actually, she was doing stuff and I was just sitting there waiting and was doing random stuff on my phone while waiting. So anyway, that was a bit of time and work, but so worth it. And it's one of those things finally going to the doctor when you're sick or having to go get your oil changed or whatever it is where you're just I just want to avoid it. At least that's how I am. Going, updating your license registration. It's this can wait. But then when you do it, it takes however many hours and then it's done and it's so worth it. So now for me, it's I have all these accounts set up and I did that. I think I had the bank appointment maybe back in November of 2022 or December, but December was my first month of completely using all of these accounts set up this way. So I now have, like I said, 5 checking accounts for my business, which kind of sounds crazy, right? If you talk to someone who doesn't know anything about Profit First or understand why you do something like that, they might be close all those accounts. Why would you have so many? But the 5 accounts, all checking accounts, because again, I want to be able to move money in whatever amounts I want to freely with no fees. And with saving accounts and money markets, you might have a small amount of fees on those accounts or have limits to how frequently you can move money. And your money may just be a bit more held up. So that's why I have checking accounts right now. Don't hold me to it. I could totally change that in a year or so. And now, what are the accounts though? So these are the accounts, and this is also what the Profit First system will tell you the accounts should be. So these are my 5 accounts. Income is the first one. I'm going to go into explain all these in a moment, but income is first. Then expenses, owner's compensation, taxes, and profit. So those are my 5 accounts. And just to quickly explain what each one is and kind of how I use it. So income is also real revenue is another way, you'll hear it called in Profit First. So this is the money that literally comes into the business. So income does not mean this is my income I make at my job. It's literally the business's revenue income. You could call it whatever you want. I'm pretty sure mine internally is just called income, but that's the money that comes in. So for me, that account from an external perspective is only receiving money. So it looks like a whole lot of Stripe and PayPal transactions, basically is what it looks like. And then the second account is expenses, which is exactly what it sounds like. This is money that I am spending on things. So you'll see things in that in terms of transactions, like me paying off my credit cards, Gusto payments to team members, maybe PayPal payments I'm making to a contractor I pay through PayPal, things like that. And then owner's compensation is money I'm setting aside to pay myself on top of my salary. And this is something where owner's comp, I might be clearing out some of it every month, but I'm not clearing out the whole thing. I like to actually leave a little bit of money in there. And then as it builds up, clear it out and give myself a big paycheck. Taxes are exactly what you think. It's saving money for tax payments. And again, that gets cleared out whenever you're sending money to pay your taxes. And then my final account is profit/emergency. So Profit First, as far as I can tell, does not talk about having emergency accounts for your business, but I've always liked doing that. So we do emergency accounts within our real estate business, or one emergency account rather, and also have an emergency account within our personal finances. And I just like knowing I have some money there in case it was a lower month in business or in case something happened to me and I wasn't able to work, that there's money sitting here that I could then make sure is paying the bills and able to pay myself. So I have a certain amount of months of expenses built up into that. But at one point, actually, I used to carry a really high emergency account balance and ended up lowering it significantly and actually investing some of the money instead and just putting it into a better bank, basically, because it was like it was doing nothing, just sitting there in my business. And in reality, a lot of that emergency expense would be going to pay myself because we do depend on my business's income as a family if something were to happen and I was not making as much money for whatever reason. So I moved it over to like my personal account, basically. So now what's in the emergency account is more so thinking about the business expenses, paying team members and things like that. So those are my 5 accounts. And when I went to open the new accounts, I actually only had to open 3 because again, I already had 2 and they were all just named checking with whatever checking account number they each had. And then I retitled internally the names of the other 2 I already had to make the system and then named them all nicknames, which is what my bank refers to them as. So I named them accordingly and also numbered them. So it goes like income first, expenses, owner's comp, taxes, and profit, all numbered 1 through 5. And then their nicknames are also like that. And so after I opened up these and everything was set up, I also had to switch everything over with the softwares I pay for and people I pay and like, where Stripe and PayPal are routing payments to and all of that. So like, that's something to think about whenever you do set this up is like, if you already have some bank accounts, like the one that you're paying most of your bills from is probably the one you should set as expenses, or the one that, you already have Stripe and PayPal coming into should be the income account so that it's just smoother on your end, because it actually took me probably like 2 months of like messing around with it and having to pay really close attention and be like, oh shoot, I forgot that recurring payment, for Etsy comes into this account. And like, now I got to fix that. And so I'm logging into the account, changing the bank account. I had to go into my credit cards and change which bank account those get paid through. So all of that kind of stuff. But I had to switch all that basically. So it takes like a month or so to get all that hooked up right. And that's fine. You keep your eyes on the account and you watch for things like that that mess up, and you do internal transfers, which is nice because these are all with one bank to fix it. And then you can go into that account and change whatever bank account it is hooked up to. So just to reiterate and possibly explain another way that might make more sense to different brains, because again, I get all this can be confusing, how the accounts work. So like any money I make goes into the income account. So that is like the starting point. That's why I number it number 1 in all my bank accounts. So everything from like template sales to affiliate sales, podcast sponsors, all of that, it all flows in there first. And which is why that account mainly looks like I said, PayPal transfers and Stripe transfers as the name for transactions, because it's all just flowing in. And for me, with that account, there actually should be no minuses except for internal transfer. So it should just all be money flowing in, which, like I said, a really great thing that I love about Profit First is that right now, at any point in the month, I'm recording this right now on the 6th. It's like I can go in there and see like, okay, how much cash in the door has actually hit my bank account in this month so far, because I did my Profit First stuff at the end of last month. So I know all the money in so far is like money for this particular month. So anyway, that's income. And then again, anything I spend comes from expenses. So credit card payments, team member payments through Gusto, contractors I work with, all of that comes out of expenses. So that account actually looks like one big transfer at the end of a month, and then lots of money exiting it throughout the month. So as you can see, high level, I can really see now how much I'm making, how much I'm spending without waiting on my bookkeeping to be done for the month. I'm literally just watching my cash flow situation, which it's worth noting, if this isn't already obvious, that like a Profit First is not like strict bookkeeping. So my money as it flows in and out of these accounts is going to look different than when I get my official books back from my bookkeeper, right? Those are going to be clean. Those are going to be to the dollar of what happened on dates and when things were paid. But Profit First, things hit at different dates and things hit your account in different amounts. So it's like, it's not perfect. You're not going for like double checking, getting the numbers exactly right. It's more just like high level, moving your money around. So it's not exactly like accounting, like to give to the IRS and a P&L. It's more nuance and more flow to it than that, which I really like. So at the end of every month though, I transfer money in certain percentages to all of my other accounts. So from, the income accounts where everything comes into, and then to the other 4 accounts, I'm transferring money from different percentages until that income, which started at 100%, right, is down to 0% at the end of the month. So all the money has been distributed where it needs to go. So distributing from the month to owner's compensation, some to my expense account to prepare for the next month, some to taxes, some to savings and emergency. And Profit First teaches a good starting percentage plan based on how much revenue your business brings in. So it starts at 0 to 250K, 250 to 500, then 500 to 1 million are like the beginning first few ranges. And you can see, right, that you have the real revenue number at 100%, and then it's suggesting like this would be a good profit percentage for you. This would be a good owner's pay, a good tax, a good operating expense, all those different percentages. But I believe it also just totally depends on your unique business. And that's the beauty of this, is that over time, you will see some trends in the way your numbers go and be able to see like, oh yeah, like this is a pretty good expense percentage for me to transfer every month. And I like that they give you starting points though. So basically though, some businesses are going to be higher expense than others. And then like some are going to, want more to taxes, want more to owner's comp, depending on how much you're making, all of that kind of stuff. But you're starting at 100% of real revenue and then dividing out from there. So for an example, though, I want to give you the percentages based on a business from $0 to 250K in revenue. So again, the real revenue number is 100%. And then Profit First would suggest 5% to profit, 50% to owner's pay. So pretty significant there. That percentage goes down when you get to 250K to 500 and 500 to 1 million, but 50% to owner's pay, 15% to taxes, and then 30% to operating expenses. So I just love that, right? Because it gives you such quick clarity, and you can look at those numbers, right? So if your business is 0 to 250K, you might hear me say all those numbers and you're like, okay, actually my operating expenses are more like 60%. The Profit First would say that's not actually a good, in most cases, operating expense amount for your business. Of course, all businesses do things differently. So you have to think about your unique business, but that's kind of some examples there. And then just to read you the 250 to 500K range in case you're curious what the changes are. So for that one, profit would be 10%, so up 5%. Owner's pay is down to 35% instead of 50. Taxes stay at 15, and then operating expenses go up to 40. So again, assuming like there's more expenses, but also you're paying yourself less is kind of how that changes when you get to the 250 to 500K range. So that is the percentages. And just to tell you, like, again, back on my own, like how I'm doing this, I'm going to do next week's episode where I'm literally walking you through the 8 steps I do at the end of every month. But my percentages have changed almost every month I've done this so far in the 6 months I've done this, which again, I'm okay with. And they're pretty close. Like I'm changing by like 5% between different accounts. So not any like huge swings. And my changes have been based on, and in reality, what we're saying of like the real revenue number range changing. Because when I've had a really big month, I tend to want to transfer things differently in different percentages than when I had a month that was less money coming in. So to tell you though, just my own percentages, what I did last month, if you're curious, again, being vulnerable with you here and sharing with you about my own business. Last month, I did 5% to profit, 35% to owner's comp, 20% to taxes, and 40% to expenses. So that's really similar to what is kind of a mix of the 250K to 500, then 500K to 1 million is the mix. I actually am doing less profit percentage than Profit First would say to do on that particular month because I did 5%, and they actually, no matter what your revenue is, never have you going below 5%. And the reason last month I did 5% is because I feel as though that profit account is plenty flush with cash. And I'm like, it doesn't need more money there. I need to be putting more money into perhaps some of these other places or just paying myself more and all of that kind of thing. So that's what I did last month. And again, I'm changing this every month and I'm making notes on why I change it. So it's one month I'm like, gosh, this month I got hit with tons of expenses. And so now my expense account is like basically at 0. So I'm going to bump that up to 45, 50%. I'm like making a note of that. And that's why I'm doing it. So let's keep talking. What does this look like month over month for me so far? So again, I feel like I've said it 1,000 times, so sorry for that. But the first month of like my first official full month of doing this was December. So I have December through May of this complete as I'm recording this. And like I said, throughout the month, I get a great picture of what's happening for me financially, which I love. And as a business owner with multiple streams of revenue, it's not, and I know a lot of you guys can relate to what I'm about to say, but it's not as simple as just like looking in Thrivecart, which is where most of my sales are coming in from, to see template sales, or even looking into Stripe or PayPal to know cash in the door, because money comes from different sources. I'm still invoicing people. I'm getting money like from PayPal that's not ever going to be reflected in Thrivecart. Like it's just all over the place. So without doing this system and without having my P&L done for the month, which is not going to be done right until I'm like done with the month, because mine gets done at the very end of the month, not week over week. I can't like just see all the numbers. I can look in Xero and see like some stuff, but it's not until my bookkeeper has like gone in and done the like sorting of everything. I don't see the numbers, right? And same with expenses. Like some expenses are on my credit card, but some are directly from my bank account. So like I can't just log into my credit card and be like, this is exactly how much I've spent this month, because that's not accounting for payroll and things like that. So anyway, these bank accounts themselves are the best data for me, and that might be the case for you as well. And I find myself basically once a week logging into my bank accounts and looking just at a high level at these Profit First accounts just to see where I'm at for the month. I also really like paying off my credit cards. I'm on auto pay, so I don't miss payments, but I also will pay them off. Or I have 2 credit cards for my business, but one primary one. But I pay off the primary one usually a few times in a month, just so I can keep bringing that expense account to become more accurate. So I can really see like, okay, like I started with this much in the account at the beginning of May. How much have I been spending? And as I'm paying off the credit card, I can get a full picture, because then payments coming directly out of my bank account are reflecting there, so that I can see, okay, like how much have I spent? I can look back at my notes and see where I started and all of that good stuff. Okay, friends. So to sum it up, oh my gosh, my honest review is that I love it. And this has been game changing for me. Like I said, it felt like the missing link in some of what I've been doing financially for my business in order for me to like really analyze spending, analyze sales, know my numbers, and be able to like save for things I want to invest in my business with confidence. So I really love it. It is also way easier to set up than I thought it would be. So that's another review. Again, I didn't even finish reading the book, but got it set up in like 3 hours with my bank. Like it's not as bad as it seems like it has to be. And it's a lot simpler to understand once you just start doing it. Like once you have these accounts set up and you're looking at your money and deciding to move it around, it feels a lot simpler than it might seem, even as I'm explaining. So like I said, this is part 1, and part 2 is coming next week. So stay tuned next week. And on that episode, I'm breaking down the 8 different steps I go through each month to do my Profit First accounting. I can literally look at that outline because I'm about to record that next. But I mean, I start with screenshotting my bank account. So I'm going to talk to you about that, of like how I take a picture of what they look like, all the way through adding notes from my bookkeeper to wrap up like my analysis, which you'll hear me talk about, of my finances for that month. So I'm going to walk you through it again so that you can like steal my system if you want to, or change yours up, or just, hear out of curiosity what another business owner is doing. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be linking to Profit First book in the show notes and some other resources as well. And I would love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram and let me know if like you're also trying this, if you're going to make that account with your bank to set up your Profit First accounts, and just any ways this episode has impacted you. And of course, I always so appreciate it when you share the Breakthrough Brand podcast with friends who are fellow business owners and might benefit from this. So that is it, guys. My honest review of Profit First. And I will be back in your earbuds next week to continue talking about this conversation. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravey.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravey.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.